Now we are coming back looking at our topic in which we said in the segment of the minutes with the minister, we're going to be talking about the situation in southern Cameroons, that is La Republique de Cameroon's conflict with southern Cameroons and the people's stride of self-determination to get the conflict over the violation of Article 47.1 of the Federal Constitution of 1961 rectified. You know, it was violated with the May 20th, 1972 referendum, which was staged by Amadou Ahidjo, which allowed the Francophones to also vote concerning the unification of what was supposed to be the independent and autonomous, West Cameroon, which represented the former Southern Cameroons as an independent, republic on its own, which joined La Republique de Cameroon in a unique two-state federation just to share sovereignty and separate independence. So it's a very interesting story. Like I said, when you get into why there's fighting, why there's people who have armed themselves. But the trouble now is that those people who have armed themselves, you see it, they have factions amongst them, and the various factions now are not actually truly working in the interest of taking the, should I say, the autonomy of the Southern Cameroonians, the people who are in this annexation conflict with La Republique de Cameroon, to a resolution. You have individuals who are instead exploiting it to their own personal self-interest, and it's derailing the entire cause of what is a proper legal resistance foundational premise to self-determination. I mean, if argued properly and respected with the rights of the people who are to be governed also taken into consideration, then this is a clear-cut case that should not have taken up to 5 years with the amount of brigandery that we've seen. But there's a reason for it, and we're getting into the details of why in this discussion, you see, talking about it. So, I mean, we were looking at Ayaba Cho and his whole CPDM background. I know some people are going to be looking at it, they're just always taking cheap shots at Ayaba Cho. Like I say, I don't know the dude personally. I'm just taking the analysis of the facts and putting them into context because, like I was pointing out as we were closing the part one, that, when Dr. Simon Munzer came out with his continuance of the AAC2 Bamenda Proclamation protocol to initiate the Declaration of Independence and Sovereignty of Southern Cameroons. You see it. He was accused of having been a former CPDM member and then constituted to a conclusion of disloyalty to the cause by Ayaba Cho and other so-called proponents of the New Wave Ambazonia movement. And that itself was not founded because this reason, I want us to get into all the details of exactly what was happening with the AAC to continuance of activities of what Dr. Simon Munzer was doing with the ADF, Anglophone Dialogue Forum, which at last enlarged into the Anglophone General Conference, was then hijacked by La Republique de Cameroon because this lack of unity which was created by the Ambazonia activists outside of the country. Now, according to the Bamenda Declaration of 1994, what was supposed to happen was that, it was even told to me that Dr. Munzer is the individual who actually read this document in tears, that at the start of the 2016 crisis, that called for Anglophones as Southern Cameroonians to essentially carefully discuss the collective actions to take amongst all interest groups, mindful of the Bamenda Proclamation in 1994. That is the initiative that Dr. Simon Munzer was taking, because the Bamenda Declaration had actually spelled out specifically, and I want to go through these points, right? This is back in 1994 from the AAC2, that out of it, there was going to be the formation of the Southern Cameroons People's Conference. This was then transformed into the Southern Cameroons People's Organizations, with the SCNC, or the Southern Cameroons National Council, acting as its executive governing body. Now, from this Bamenda Proclamation, this protocol of organization was supposed to follow, with these specific points now stated. Now, point 6 already declared that the Anglophone Council was supposed to proclaim the revival of the independence and sovereignty of the Anglophone territory of the Southern Cameroons and take all measures necessary to secure, defend, and preserve the independence, sovereignty, and integrity of the said territory. So what Amazonia came and declared was not new. It was not that the Southern Cameroons National Convention never had this in their protocol to seek the restoration of the sovereignty of Southern Cameroons. The trouble now is the implementation. One form was supposed to follow the proper international respect for legal protocols concerning this issue, and the other wanted to instead come in as an armed front. So get this point again, because point 7 states also, and this is coming out of the Bamenda Proclamation of 1994, that there was supposed to be a proclamation of independence restoration, which would cause the Anglophone Council to transform automatically into the Southern Cameroon's Constituent Assembly for the drafting of a constitution for the independent and sovereign state of Southern Cameroons. So what was supposed to happen was that the AAC2 was now supposed to become this Anglophone Council and then transform itself into this Southern Cameroon's Constituent Assembly, with these other organizations, the Southern Cameroon's People's Conference and the SCNC, operating, of course, primordially as the executive governing body to drive this Southern Cameroon Constituent Assembly into realization. So that what we were supposed to be discussing right now with La République de Cameroon was supposed to be a restructuring of the federal constitution of 1961, taking into consideration that Article 47.1 was violated and that we didn't have things like a standing army, which would need to be instituted, that we were supposed to give ourselves proper autonomy so that, finances were not going to then have conflict. Like Ahidjo said, that it was difficult to be managing the finances of two states. You see, we have to reinstate the House of Grassfield Chiefs and give them greater influence inside the cultural and political dynamics of the raising of what would have been West Cameroons. I mean, there's so many things: opening the deep sea port, having access to our own airlines. I mean, there's a lot of detailing that needs to be sat down and discussed in the creation of a state. Which just declaring Ambazonia, saying that you're free tomorrow, where is the constitution of the Federal Ambazonia, which it claims to suggest or bring into usage over Southern Cameroons? Has it been ratified? Has it been voted on? Has it been accepted by a proper representation of delegates from Southern Cameroons, which could have a population of about 8 million people? I mean, these facts and these points, they do mean something. Before, like I pointed out, Ayaba Cho came with this statement that he was trying to claim that he has the capacity to stop and start the ghost towns indirectly. And then he claimed that he wasn't the one who actually initiated that meme. But this is the irony of all of this. When that flyer was sent out, making that declaration, people reacted to it. I did as well, because I quickly understood the political science behind it. It's a propaganda trick that was played between him and his network, that they would come out with a statement to give the impression that he has the capacity to end the ghost towns, because immediately after the threat by the DOJ, all of the Southern Cameroon's activists were going to reposition themselves to give the impression that they weren't hardliners. So that's what that move was intended to do. When he now gave that move in gesture to give the impression that he wasn't a hardliner and even has the authority to call the ghost towns off, of course he was going to get backlash, and they knew it. But to claim that authority was the priority, of course, and try and minimize the IG again. Now he did that, and then immediately a disclaimer came out claiming that it was instead Dr. Akwanga Ebenezer, who was also one of the founders of the Southern Cameroon's Youth League, that Ayaba Cho also was secretary of in 1995. All these details are going to get into point to give you a clear understanding of what's been evolving. So you see that AGOVC now denounced that it wasn't them in collaboration with Dr. Akwanga who made that declaration. And I know Dr. Akwanga is someone who is actually more level-headed, who possibly could have taken this initiative on his own. But the fact that I do know there is some collaboration between the two gentlemen, I'm not going to rule out entirely that there wasn't collaboration on this particular incident. And like I say, I'm going to give you more facts and details so that you can actually understand why. But finally, we received an audio later on in the day in which the Ayaba Cho Lucas disclaimed, or he didn't actually even disclaim. That was the irony of that audio. Because in that audio, he didn't actually make any statement recognizing that there was a flyer that was in circulation, which he is clarifying that he is saying AGOVC is not responsible for. He instead came out and gave a long explanation about the importance of Ghost Town, and then actually related it to the consortium. And I want to make this point. He said that the consortium actually instituted the ghost towns, and he doesn't have the right to even call them off. So, people wanted to say that maybe it was La République or he has detractors, but why would La République try to make a propaganda gesture that would instead boost the authority of AGOVC and Ayaba Cho Lucas as being someone who can give a call out and statement for the canceling of the ghost towns? Question. You see it, unless they're collaborating, and that of course is never needs to be ruled out. As far as I'm concerned, there is a collaboration. Truthfully, Agupsi and Ayaba Cho Lucas are in cahoots with La Republique based on the fact that he did have his CPDM links back in the early 1990s specifically. And this is why I want to look at it this way. Because like we just pointed out, the Bamenda Declaration already had its protocol for how the initiation for the separation of the two Cameroons was going to take place, and it was going to be instituted through a restructuring of the federal constitution, which is why the Southern Cameroon's Constituent Assembly needed to be reconstituted. Point 9 specifically of the Bamenda Declaration did state that Southern Cameroon shall negotiate with LRC a peaceful separation on the basis of the Boya Peace Initiative. And I mean, you have to recognize that it was supposed to be a systematic step-by-step process before any initiative to declare an armed struggle with La Republique would be taking, of course, into constituent value the lives of the civilians on the ground, which has not been actually properly taken into consideration. And there's going to be one or two reasons for this. People think that by allowing a humanitarian situation to be provoked is going to bring about faster UN intervention in the situation. But I'm telling you that if they would follow the actual machinery which was intended, that would have allowed the protocols out of the amended declaration to have been instituted, then we wouldn't have been in our situation today. Because AGovC, where does it actually derive its legitimacy of mandate from? This is the question that I'm going to ask it, because if we see that the SCNC was created out of the Bamenda Declaration of 1994, then what happened if Ayaba Cho claims that the consortium is what derives authority to call the ghost towns? The consortium evolved into what became SCACUF. And that was after we had individuals like Barrister Bala, Deacon Tassang, these individuals all, after we had the crackdown on the consortium, and individuals had to escape and leave Cameroon and then went to Nigeria. And then there was this general conclave in which SCNC activists, as well as individuals from the consortium and individuals who had this inspiration to create Ambazonia came together. And specifically, what happened is that the Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia Consortium United Front was formed on July 8th, 2017, with the election of Sisekou Julius Ayuk Tabe selected as the president of Ambazonia, which actually did then claim to have sovereignty of the former Southern Cameroons. Now, I want to really question something here, because the legitimacy of this organization is going to be determined now on the quantity, or at least the caliber, of the Southern Cameroon's National Council membership that was able to attend it. But also what has to be taken into consideration is the representation of non-SCNC members representing the general civil society and political will and economic will of Southern Cameroonians who were able to actually participate outside of being in any particular faction. How many of them were able to go to Nigeria and participate in this conclave? Because if we want to base it on the SCNC value of legitimacy, then that's because the Boya Proclamation in 1993 was first devised as the AAC1 with a basis of about 5,000 delegates, representatives of as funds, political leaders, economic leaders. I mean, it was a broad representation of individuals from all of the various divisions and ethnic groups of what makes up Southern Cameroons as it's joined to La République de Cameroon. So the AAC1, AAC2, and the Boya and Bamenda declarations had the legitimacy and will of the people through representative universal suffrage. What constituted this Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia Consortium United Front in Nigeria, it's not actually going to carry the same weight. And it's going to become even more ironic when this group, though it's granted its legitimacy to act, and it's evolving, pushing the same activities essentially that Foncha had done in 1995. The same file that went to the UN is exactly what Sisekou Ayuk Tabe just repeated the same actions again. What is ironic specifically is that in 2019 March, this same Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia Consortium United Front established or formed the Southern Cameroon's Liberation Council. And this formed an all Southern Cameroon's People's General Conference in Washington, D.C. And what is so ironic is that Ayaba Cho Lucas and AGFC abstained from this meeting. So he's basically declared that he's out of the proper flow of inspirational, legitimate representation of the Southern Cameroon's people by making these decisions. And honestly, my people, it doesn't speak good, because though we've gone above our 15-minute point to make just a 30-minute segment, we have to do a last part 3 segment in which we're going to really look at Ayaba Cho Lucas in the context of why this is really something that you have to really pay attention to, because it creates a lot of conflict with finding a resolution to the situation in Southern Cameroons. And I say, I speak on the basis of universal suffrage. I speak on the basis of a conflict resolution strategy, which will end with a referendum allowing all of the voices of the decentralist, federalist, and separatist to be respected through the Southern Cameroonians voting in favor of what they want to choose as their form of governance. But with individuals like this playing outside of all of that system of what we know to be accurate democratization, essentially being a dictator, which is what we saw in Paul Biya that we do not want, then we do now have a conflict with this particular individual and the way that they have been derailing the process of the stride towards the sovereignty of Southern Cameroons with a lot of aggression, a lot of armed violence, not particularly just against La Republique, but more particularly against Southern Cameroonians. That is where the conflict now is being exposed. So we're going to go into a part 3 to talk about the AGFC and the whole issue of Ayaba Cho Lucas in relationship to the SCNC and the legitimacy of who does really have the right to call the ghost towns in Southern Cameroons. And you'll be surprised. But like I said, to get into the next video, make sure that you do share this one so that other people will be able to follow you and get this knowledge that we, of course, are giving to you from Minutes with the Minister on the Ministry of Spiritology's YouTube channel. And of course, if you've been following this far, you are getting the message and you like it, do click like, share this video, subscribe to our channel, as we'll be evolving more and more concepts to keep you enlightened and awakened on your path of spiritual discovery. So that's where we're going to end this part 2, and we're coming back at you with part 3. But that's why I'm going to cut out and say peace, profound peace.